Good thinking requires ample time. Good leaders don't go with their guts. They think with their brains. When faced with a difficult situation, whether it's a divorce or a war, they realize it's important to think through every implication. A crisis often comes with a sense of urgency. But when people are faced with an important decision, time can be a tool. A priority when facing any trial or test should be to make time to think. An extreme example of being pressed for time to think about an important decision occurred during the Cold War, when President John F. Kennedy was faced with the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Having experienced a recent military failure with the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, Kennedy was under pressure to respond to the Soviet Union's aggressive tactics with a display of American strength. Stealthily, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev had been building medium and long-range missiles in Cuba, within 100 miles of Florida. It was a bold and frightening move from the Soviets, but an aggressive response didn't guarantee a good outcome. If an aggressive response failed, millions of people could die. The stakes were high. Kennedy needed to make a decision, but he wouldn't allow anyone to rush him. Instead of letting emotions or political pressure get the best of him, he did everything possible to create space in which he could think. Instead of drawing on U.S. military brass, he consulted his own mental resources. Kennedy often walked or swam alone, during which time he would be working out a problem. He tried to examine the missile problem from Khrushchev's point of view, seeking a greater understanding of the situation before he formulated a reaction. Kennedy realized that he didn't want to best his opponent. He wanted to work together toward a good outcome. After more than a week of meetings with advisors who were urging a military strike on the Cuban missiles, Kennedy decided on a blockade instead of military action. It was a decision that gave Khrushchev time to think about how he wanted to respond. In turn, Khrushchev de-escalated a few days later, making a gesture towards peace. Negotiation became possible, and nuclear war was averted. A serene environment with limited distraction promotes presence of mind. The hustle and bustle of contemporary life makes it difficult to inhabit the present moment with full awareness. Mental clarity must be cultivated, meaning that people need to conserve their mental energies so that they have time to think deeply about their lives. Too often, people become stuck in obsessive thought patterns about the past or the future. Devotion to the present moment isn't easy. Indeed, the process requires real discipline. An iconic example of pure presence of mind was Marina Abramovic's 2010 performance series, The Artist is Present. Over a 70-day period at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, for 8 hours each day, Abramovic sat in silence across from one attendee at a time. The artist never spoke or touched the other person. Instead, she gazed into each person's eyes without distraction. Many people who experienced the performance described it as transcendent. It was unusual to have someone pay such deep attention. It's not necessary to undertake such a dramatic piece of performance art to achieve presence of mind. A simple technique is to limit the sensory inputs and perpetual distractions that have become so common, like checking email less frequently. Deactivating notifications on social media apps and sites, and unplugging from the 24-hour news cycle are likewise good ways to promote mental clarity. Generally, people should depend less on their electronic devices, which expose them to excess distractions and demands. Instead of recording a video or taking a photo of a sunset, it's better and more fulfilling to experience the sunset fully, with careful attention. A memory is better than a photograph. A clear mind promotes deep thought and success. People who achieve some degree of distance from the routine distractions of everyday life have the ability to discern which subjects are truly important. Too often, busy people perceive tasks as urgent when they're really just unimportant matters that are time-sensitive. Meanwhile, deeper, important questions that don't have an explicit deadline attached go neglected or ignored, lost in the bustle of hectic routines. A clear mind helps people understand what requires their devoted attention and which matters can safely go ignored. It's important to dedicate serious thought to big questions about happiness, values, and beliefs. With too many distractions, it's nearly impossible to give these complex matters the level of thought they deserve. Such topics require serious contemplation over time. They can't simply be added to the afternoon's to-do list. One good tool to use for such contemplation is journaling, which many renowned thinkers and leaders have used. Oscar Wilde, Queen Victoria, Ben Franklin, and Seneca all kept a journal, a practice that helped them attend to the most important questions in life. Journaling also promotes a general sense of well-being and can be used in the service of specific projects like overcoming trauma. Simply transferring a thought to paper can sometimes promote deep insights. There is an important distinction between deep thinking and overthinking, which can be distracting in the heat of competition. A clear mind that has achieved a depth of self-understanding can be a powerful performance booster. Professional athletes often talk about the benefit of clearing their minds instead of indulging worries in the heat of competition or letting their thoughts race ahead of them. Focusing on the final outcome, such as winning a race, can make it more difficult to focus on performing well. Similarly, professional archers often rely on muscle memory and instinct, rather than careful calibration, to make a perfect shot. Inner serenity is just as important as mental clarity. Mental clarity is one thing. Spiritual peace is quite another. A well-rounded individual needs both to feel happy and fulfilled in life. To be fulfilled, an individual needs to have a strong sense of right and wrong, to heal old emotional wounds, and to cultivate strong relationships. A mentally strong person can perform well, but only an emotionally secure person can find pleasure in success. One example of a person gifted with mental fortitude, but who neglected his soul and suffered spiritual malaise, is Tiger Woods. The golfer, a master of the game, overcame many impressive opponents and professional obstacles. But for too long, Woods ignored the psychological wounds inflicted by his controlling, cruel father, who used intense intimidation and other extreme tactics in their training sessions. On one level, the training that Woods received from his father made him an excellent athlete. But on another level, the bad treatment degraded his psyche, such that Woods could never really enjoy his own success. The first 15 years of Woods' career as a golf pro were triumphant, but he became less happy with every win. The situation dramatically worsened when his father died in 2006. His personal life veered out of control as he indulged in reckless adulterous affairs and other self-destructive behavior. For many years, his game, his health, and his family life suffered. Woods only rebounded when he addressed his personal crisis. Once his emotional wounds were properly treated, Woods returned to the golf course, where he found success and finally began to enjoy the sport. Woods' story demonstrates that no achievement can be relished when the soul of the achiever isn't at peace. Spiritual maintenance is an essential practice for people who wish to not only succeed, but also to enjoy their success. Virtuous living promotes stillness. Living virtuously isn't about following other people's standards. Instead, it requires true self-knowledge. Since humans have free will, each person is responsible for taking the time to develop his or her own moral standards. Virtuousness requires the further step of living by those standards and upholding them on a daily basis. Virtuousness isn't a trait of people who are holy or perfect. In fact, virtue is not about aspiration at all. It's more a practical strategy that can be followed every day. For the Stoics of ancient Rome, who valued virtue above all else, virtuous living meant behaving with integrity and honor at home and in public. It was a trait that had to be proven anew each day. Virtue can be a great source of personal power, helping people when they face challenges and darkness in their lives. It provides courage in stressful situations. People who have taken the time to develop their moral standards often don't have to deliberate when faced with a choice, because in their minds, the virtuous path is clear-cut. But people who don't have a vivid sense of what's right and wrong often feel ill at ease and burdened by difficult choices. Every decision becomes a grave and tiresome deliberation. Inner peace isn't some mystical state. It's the product of good choices that embody thoughtful standards over time. Virtuous living, therefore, is not just about behaving well towards other people, but also about promoting personal happiness. People who don't develop moral standards or who defy their own standards may find success and happiness in the short term, but it won't be sustainable. Personal choices give life meaning. Virtue helps ensure that the meaning is a good one. Many people's motivations are buried deep beneath the surface. Muddy water can be perilous. A deadly creature or a sharp object might lurk unseen beneath the surface. The same is true of human consciousness, which is dangerous when it's opaque and cloudy. People who lack moral clarity are susceptible to being manipulated by desires and emotional wounds that they don't see or understand. Often, deeply buried motivations stem from childhood trauma, such as an abusive parent. Any vulnerability that we feel as a child has the potential to control our behavior in adulthood. A good strategy for dealing with this problem is to identify and shore up those vulnerabilities. Everyone has an inner child, and that inner child needs to feel safe and secure. Anxieties and difficult situations can trigger the inner child's feelings of vulnerability, which can lead to emotional upheaval and undesirable behavior like unchecked lust for drugs or sex. Many people are driven by desire, which is often irrational. People who seek stillness and clarity must make sure that they recognize and understand the desires that motivate them. Once a desire is recognized, it loses some of its power. For instance, a man who's driven by an unconscious desire for money may behave badly in its pursuit. He can interrogate the desire and examine the negative consequences that it's had in his life, and thus weaken it through understanding. The logical identification of an irrational desire is always the first step in curbing self-destructive urges. Then the desire must be mastered. Otherwise, the desire itself becomes the master of the person who feels it. Secret desires and vulnerabilities lose their power when they're exposed to the light of reason. Once an impulse is understood, it can be resisted. And in that resistance, there is great potential to develop spiritual fortitude. Stillness is an interior experience, but it can be enhanced by outside sources. There are many people and places that individuals can look to as sources of inner strength. Everything in the universe is interconnected. Meditating on these connections is a good way to soothe uncomfortable feelings like loneliness and grief. However terrible an emotion might seem, someone else in history has felt it. Someone else is probably feeling it right now. No one is truly exceptional, and recognizing this can help people feel closer to their communities. One way to enhance stillness is to interact with nature, which can be a powerful tool for healing low spirits. Even imagining nature, like a favorite beach spot, can provide escape and solace for a person who can't physically visit that place in the moment. Another source of solace is spiritual faith, whether it's in God or the universe or some other higher power. By acknowledging that there are forces at work that lie beyond human comprehension, it's possible to cultivate a sense of wonder. Perhaps above all else, relationships with other people nurture the human spirit. The modern world drives people into isolated lifestyles that see them working too hard and socializing too little. But success is an experience that should be shared. Children push their parents to be better, more generous people. Friends support one another in times of celebration and need. Romantic partners help one another develop their capacity for empathy and joy. Beauty is everywhere, always, even in terrible situations. When she was hiding from Nazis, Anne Frank took solace in gazing out the window. And Fred Rogers, known to children as Mr. Rogers, famously suggested that anyone who's upset in a time of crisis should focus on looking for anyone trying to help make the situation better. Seeking out goodness in the world is a sure path to stillness. Stillness isn't just mental and spiritual. It's also a bodily experience. Stillness is a mental, spiritual, and physical experience. The three elements are all interconnected. For instance, physical exercise helps promote mental clarity. What we do with our bodies, how we exercise, eat, sleep, and move around in the world can promote or derail our serenity and success. Exercise, particularly walking, is another important strategy for achieving stillness. Some of history's greatest thinkers, including Kierkegaard, found walking to be a meditative form of exercise that helped them think better. A strong body supports a strong mind and a strong spirit. Routines matter. Making decisions all the time can be exhausting. But daily decisions that become a routine or a matter of rote help free up mental energy for other things. Some routines can even take on a spiritual dimension, soothing inner turmoil and stoking happiness and creativity. Routines should provide ample opportunities for rest, relaxation, and diversion. People often work too hard in the name of abstract success, but that's a habit that leads inevitably to failure. In sports, overusing a muscle can cause an injury. The same is true for people who work too hard, even if that injury isn't muscular. Sleep should be a matter of routine, but too often people consider it a luxury. Busy people feel they have to check off every item on a to-do list before they go to bed, and as a result, they don't get enough sleep. This is a mistake because performance is often tied to sleep habits. People who don't get enough rest do everything at a disadvantage, which means that tasks take longer and aren't necessarily performed well.